All right, gentlemen, you guys can unmute yourselves and put your videos on. Awesome. All right. Well, great. Well, first of all, my name is Tom Aungst. I want to welcome everyone tonight. Tonight we have some of the top arrangers and composers from a percussion standpoint in the activity. We have Tom Rarick of the Bluecoats. We have Andrew Markworth of the Crossmen, and Mike McIntosh of the Cavaliers. So, gentlemen, thank you for being here. I also want to thank the cadets for allowing me to do this. The director is Denise Bonfiglio. The COO is Justin Moore, and the marketing manager is Brad Martin. So again, cadets, thank you. This is our 4th live streaming. We have 2 more to go. So think Percussion Thursdays, 8 o'clock p.m. Next Thursday, June 11th, we have Paul and Sandy Rennick talking about their success in drum corps. The end of the month, June 25th, we have Mark Thurston, WGI Percussion Director, Tim Fairbanks of Rhythm X, Sean Vega of RCC, and Brett Kuhn, formerly with the Cavaliers and WGI judge. We're going to talk about indoor percussion and how that has either negatively or positively affected drum corps. So that should be really fun. I also want to mention June 22nd through the 26th. Mark it on your calendars. The Cadet Percussion Program is running a week-long clinic/workshop for all ages. So if you're middle school, high school, or beyond, come and learn about cadet-style techniques and music. 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. Every day at the end of the day, we're going to have a performance by one of the cadets that you'll see in 2021. At the end of that week, we're going to have the full percussion group performing virtually, and we'll play a segment of the 2021 show. We will also have instructor and director tracks talking about indoor, outdoor arranging, electronics, culture, percussion, keyboard techniques, whatever. There'll be plenty of time to ask questions. So again, mark on your calendar, June 22nd, Monday through Friday, June 26th. So you can register at cadets.org. All right, so let's get started. And I think people want to find out like how you got here as the top guys. For me, it was I marched in the Corps, became a snare tech, and then my dream in 1989 came true. I went to Westchester, got a music ed degree. I went to Rutgers, got my master's in jazz drum set. But really, my goal was drum corps. I didn't want to really be a band director. It was like, if I go to music school, then I have my summers off and I can kind of fulfill my dream. So what was it for you guys? Let's start with Mike.
Hey everybody, Tom and the Cadets organization. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it, big time. I was a saxophone player in high school, and my first rehearsal where I was going to be in the drum line, they needed some bass drummers. So I went around the corner, I heard the drum line, and I physically felt like something like punched me in the stomach. Like I had a physical sensation my first rehearsal. It was very bizarre. It was like the universe was saying, hey, there's something here, or don't do this, and I didn't listen. So went for it. I auditioned for the Cavaliers. I was cut. I went, practiced a lot, and blew off a Beastie Boys concert, went to DCI South, saw the Blue Devils, and in '87, marched 3 years with the Blue Devils on snare, aged out as a section leader in '90, and went to North Texas, where I got a chance to learn from Ralph and Tom Float, Tom Hannum, and my teachers were actually, my TAs were actually Paul Rennick and Jeff Prosperie. So I was really just lucky, right place, right time. Taught Night Express, taught Blue Knights, went to Cavaliers in '98, had a chance to teach with the extremely talented Tom Rarick in '04 through '08, and then took a summer off. And 2010, I've been back with the Cavaliers as one of the designers, music coordinator. I have a degree in composition from Butler University.
Yeah, it's awesome. There's some stuff I didn't know. I knew the Blue Devil thing, but the whole saxophone thing, that's really kind of cool. So I'm going to go to Tom next. And Tom marched in '94, '95 in the snare line, and then was part of the staff for a number of years. And what I really remember was, you were one of the top members, very, very meticulous. And I think more importantly, you were from Pennsylvania. And that's where I'm from.
Yeah,
so there's got to be something in the water there.
It was the Reading Buccaneers connection.
There you go.
My father, fun fact, is one of my first performing gigs on rudimental snare drum was with the Reading Buccaneers alumni corps.
Oh, wow.
So like my dad started taking me to alumni rehearsals, John Flowers, all those guys, they just kind of took me under their arm when I was, 10, 11, 12 kind of thing. And I just started playing with them. I just started playing those alumni charts, and it was a blast. And I learned so much, from those guys. But I've been around it for most of my life, just growing up, because my dad had marched. He marched Bucks in the mid '70s, but a bunch before that too. But just kind of grew up in the culture, kind of like we would go to shows, over the summer, even before I was kind of drumming. But yeah.
Yeah. So you went to IUP, right?
I did. Yep.
Yeah. I do remember that, and it was like Westchester or IUP, especially in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone was asking me this. Was it what high school did you go to in Pennsylvania?
Carlisle High School.
Carlisle.
Near Harrisburg. Yep.
Yeah, they used to have a kick-ass percussion program there, and I remember judging them indoor-wise. Might have been in 84, 85-ish, somewhere in it. So it was like you guys, North Penn, or Horsham. But man, Carlisle was just, and in my head, your instructor who I met, I thought, man, I want to do that someday. I want to have a high school, or seriously, like Carlisle.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
no, I remember. So Mark Gray was my teacher in high school. He was, coincidentally enough, at that time, he was the caption head at the Bluecoats as well. So so there was a strong connection between my high school and that. I mean, this has really not a lot of relation to how I ended up there, I guess.
Right.
So how did you at this point? But
so I know you went into the Air Force. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
So that was, you did some stuff with us, with the cadets in the 90s. Went to the Air Force. I mean, how did you get to the Bluecoats, and how are you doing what you're doing right now? I guess that's what I don't know.
After I aged out, it was such a great opportunity to be able to teach at the cadets, and come back and be part of that and learn and do all that. But so over that summer, I was auditioning for jobs and stuff. I had a couple auditions. When I won the job, it was in '97, was over that summer. So then I went to boot camp right away after that '97 summer. So it just became impractical to do, 60 some days of tour and all that. I can't do that, obviously. So I was I was doing high school stuff. I was writing more. I was doing a couple local kind of smaller programs in Maryland, DC area. And then, so just the connections to I guess around that time, around 2000 or so, the people that I had some, I guess I knew those guys, like Dan DeLong, who was the guy who kind of came in around 2000 to kind of take over and kind of re-steer the percussion program. And the Corps was kind of going through they had just missed finals, I think, for the first time in a long time. And we're kind of just retooling and all that. So it was part of a new energy. And 2000, Dan started there. 2001, they had a need for some people to just ensemble, snare tech kind of stuff, utility things. So I came on that summer to do that because I knew Dan and I knew a couple other people that were teaching.
Right.
So and then just kind of snowballed from there. The next year, they were in need of a front ensemble writer, and I was, I didn't have the experience really that I needed, but I volunteered anyhow, and Dan was gracious enough to let me do it, and then just kind of snowballed in there, and then just of course working with Mike, and then
Well, Dan DeLong is a Pennsylvania guy.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Crossmen.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. They had wonderful lines at the West Shoreman Senior Corps, it was the early '90s, that kind of time frame. But yeah, it's a vibrant scene.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So Andrew, and before we came on live, I asked Andrew, I said, how's Texas? I don't live in Texas. I was like, yeah, but the Crossmen are in Texas. So, and Tom, do you live in Ohio? Where do you live, Tom?
I live outside of DC.
DC. And I know, Mike, you live in Minneapolis. I know that just through the connection with Music for All. So, and now I know you live in Ohio, and I did know that, Andrew. I apologize. So how did you get started with the Crossmen?
Well, I started, my writing really started at Centerville High School, which I grew up around the program. My dad was the band director for 35 years. So since the day I was born, I was just around. And then as I went through, I was a snare drummer in the program, and then I marched drum corps. I did a couple years of Glassman and aged out at Cavaliers.
When
Mike was
there? When Mike was there?
It was right between Mike's times, actually.
I was at
when Mike was at Bluecoats
with Tom,
So during that time, Centerville never really had a front ensemble. They would have wind players do it in the winter and had like a rhythm section, some electronics, and like a rack, and that was basically it in the fall. And I had been pushing the program and like we need to develop this in the fall so it can be strong in the winter and all that. And so my dad, who was the band director at the time, was like, "All right, well we can start a front ensemble program, but you have to write the parts." I was like, "Okay, that sounds good." And I got really into it. I became very annoying with all the places I marched, and I would talk to the pit guys constantly and ask questions and try to learn from that. And my styles kind of reflected where I marched. So I worked hard there. That eventually led to me working at Rhythm X. And after a couple successful seasons there, then I got a call from Lee Bettis to come to Carolina Crown. He had just gotten the gig there in 2007. And I wrote the front ensemble book there from 2007 to 2014. During the last part of those years, Lee and I did some work at Crossmen as well, in addition to Crown. And so we were doing the thing there. In 2014, I actually started writing the battery parts at Crossmen. And then going into 15, I had the opportunity to take on the brass writing as well. And then given that opportunity, I figured like I wanted to put everything I had into that to make sure that it would go well. And there's a lot of work and undertaking. So I moved to Crossman primarily from 2015 until now.
So we got, with the three of you guys, we got some geniuses here. I mean, Andrew, you're doing the whole thing. Tom, you're doing the battery and the front ensemble. Mike, you're doing programming and sound and battery. I mean, maybe that's what it is for the modern arranger. But Andrew, that's impressive. Like, what did you learn those skills? Was that something you went to school to arrange for, for bands, or what? I mean, that just doesn't kind of happen. Like, how did you get that?
Yeah, I played trombone quite a bit through school as well. I was doing both through middle school and high school. And then I was a music ed major, ended up being a band director for a few years before I went to writing full time. So during all that, I was involved in winds stuff quite a bit. I started writing for Centerville. Started out as kind of a thing where I was writing the pit book, and then I would write like an original minute-long thing for the band to work as a transition between parts. And then the next year it was 2 minutes, added some wind parts. The next year it was half the show. The next year it was the whole show. So it was kind of grew out of that. My dad was an arranger for a long time, so I primarily learned the wind stuff from him. And then it's actually been really, really fortunate for me at Crown for a while, but also in all my high school writing where, especially in Texas, I get the opportunity to pretty much write percussion books with the best brass arrangers and wind arrangers in the activity. So I get the opportunity to study their scores regularly at a high level with some of these really great Texas bands, and it's really influenced how I do things and to see what I like and what I don't like. So my percussion writing has actually been a huge asset to my wind writing through that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's impressive. And I'm going to kind of throw myself in the ring for, I think it was 2.5 years. So 92, 93, and half of 94, I wrote everything. And then I had Neil come on, and we were pretty successful. But I mean, I'm almost pushing 60. So some of those technical skills that we needed to advance to, I was like, all right, I get someone else in here. So I'm honored to have you guys on because it's really cool in this day and age that you're able to do that. I mean, I think band, it's different, but top level drum corps, that's really pretty impressive. So I want to talk a little bit about some things that have kind of affected the activity. And I think we have to kind of talk and kind of set the mood a little bit. If you go back to the 70s, and I've learned some of this stuff over these live streamings, which have been awesome. But the 70s, the rock star, it was the drum lines, right? Yeah, it's some marching keyboards and marching timpanis, but it was about the drum lines. And what was cool about the 70s and a lot of the 80s, each drum line had their own sound and their look. The writing was so different. I mean, you could, band was warming up a mile down the road, you could tell they were hanging that roll. You could tell the Blue Devils because of the material that they were playing and how high the snares were. And each drum line kind of had their distinct sound. We got into the 80s, front ensembles became true front ensembles because now we're in front of the corps. Drumline started to run around. I mean, I know that because I was in the corps when it was like Zingali, and we're doing this curvilinear stuff and huge steps. It was like a horn line marching. But to me, 80s was about the total ensemble, and that's the one thing I learned from Tom was it's about the music. It's not about the drum parts, the horn parts, and the front ensemble. It's about the full ensemble and the music. The 80s, to me, percussively, it seemed like you had full productions now. They were part of the core. Bigger effects and bigger events using the percussion. Front ensemble started to develop into having more than just maybe a marimba or two. To me, now you started to have 3, 4, 5. And we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, how the Cavaliers, to me, set the bar high where you cleared out a minute or so and it went, boom, there's the front ensemble. 2000s was a timestamp mark time for me because I think it was around 2005 we used mics. We were able to amplify the pit. And I went, oh, this is awesome. This is better than like sliced bread because now you could balance the front ensemble. They could be the rock stars they needed to be. You wrote differently. You scored differently. The techniques were different. You could use different mallets. And they kind of came part of the drum corps. So to me, that was a moment in history for drum corps and percussion designers in general, because it was like, here's everything now you need. So my question to you guys, what are some things that you think, and it doesn't have to be in the last 5 or 10 years, it could be, I mean, I have a couple more that I think of, but it could be in the last 10 years. What are some things that you think have changed and moved the activity forward that it's kind of changed the way you write, design maybe as a core? I don't know, Tom, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, two that come to mind. I mean, one is it's the next, I guess, the current state of the amplification where we're amplifying like horn players like on the field, or amplifying things on the field, and just the depth that creates and the effect that has on the whole ensemble. That certainly affected the way that I guess, write or conceive moments, or just the presence of the battery specifically as they're, kind of playing behind that sound and trying to get that stuff to cut through. And, so I think that's a little bit new. And just the other, I guess, timestamp kind of thing is the electronic like textures. I mean, apart from amplification, but just that whole additional choir of things that are so integral in everybody's show, I think. It's certainly an aid, and certainly it's a tool, but it's another thing to balance and to contend with, I think, from a volume and appropriateness, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, no, I agree. I think and I don't know when that actually, was it a year? I know you guys had a lot to do with that.
I forget exactly when it became, 2006 or something like that, or I know it. Did we do it incrementally, like where you could? Is that Scotland? Like.
I'm on a very important call right now. Excuse me. I love you.
Yeah, so I agree. And do you think like some of the stuff that's been going on, we have to dial it back in, I guess? Because
do I think that?
Yeah, do you think so? Maybe, and whoever else.
I mean,
because I
there's
think
probably times that's true and times that isn't. Like I think the experimentation is and the attempts to do new things or create new textures or like bold ideas on the field is what drives things forward. But certainly there's times that, that doesn't always pan out the way you want it to. But I don't necessarily think the answer is pulling it back in. But I think getting more refined with our choices and editing is probably, we're going to get better at that.
The last call we had, I kind of went around the table and I said, what do you think is the evolution or direction the drum corps should go? And I think, each person had a kind of a different answer, but I want to say Dennis kind of said that, we need to kind of maybe, he didn't say dial it in, but we have to have a better balance. Like he'd love to hear, just the horn line instead of everything kind of just coming at you. And I think we all kind of agreed it's a balance of that. And I said, well, here's the thing. Drum corps does this. Pushes you over the edge, and then it brings you back a little bit and go, yeah, okay, and then pushes you over the edge. And so, I mean, I agree. I think it's a balance of all that, and knowing when you want to punch someone in the face, and then when it's like, it's time, maybe to back off. So
I
Mike,
think we're approaching
go ahead,
the point where most people have the equipment and like they have people with the skills, and I mean we all have taste level and ear and that kind of stuff. I mean we don't know exactly how to make that happen, but I think that's becoming more sophisticated, like how we manipulate sound, and more professional as a result. I think
Right.
for most of the cores. So I think we're getting there.
Well,
But
don't you think too, like watching you guys, the way you use that, there's an energy that happens when you use it and you're really, I guess, pushing volume. I mean,
sure.
I saw you guys 2 or 3 times last year. I thought the show was great. I loved what you did and the whole thing. But there was times when, because it was amplified, instead of like sitting and clapping, I stood,
Hmm.
because it was just this energy that came at me, that was, you may not be able to get if you didn't quite have it. And as a designer, I think about that. The
Sure.
person sitting there just kind of coming and as a fan doesn't, but I'm always kind of, my wheels are turning thinking, and I thought, man, that got me to stand, and maybe without that at the end of the phrase, maybe I wouldn't have.
The whole thing was kind of based around hopefully like creating some sort of a concert-esque experience too. So like
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was part of that energy that makes you want to react that way, I think. So
Yeah, well,
it
I
may
did.
not be appropriate for every show or every choice or
Yeah,
Shostakovich or whatever, but you know what I'm saying.
yeah. Mike, how about you? What's a moment in time here that made a difference, maybe for you, as a
Ah,
teacher or writer?
well, I think when I went back to school, I learned I was like a huge theory and music history geek, which was a surprise to me. And I started noticing the composers throughout every genre, like that were kind of responsible for moving music into another, kind of another mode, another genre, another energy, be it chromaticism or tonality or atonality, what have you. And I'm kind of a believer that we're on this earth for a little while to just try and push within the realms of taste as much as possible. I learned a lot from Brett Kuhn about space and musicianship, and I think there's a right place. I mean, I think the way the Bluecoats approached their show last year was spot on from a conceptual standpoint, with it's big stadium Beatles freak out scream experience. But there have been a ton of things throughout, I mean, the last, I don't even know, 30, 40 years that to me kind of warrant my way of thinking about pushing, like, 75 Muchachos going down on one knee playing threes, and the blindfolds from 82 Bridgman, and the ensemble sound of 87 Cadets, and the buzz roll sound coming off the front sideline, 90 Cadets. You probably don't remember that. I don't know that sound. I just always remember that. In fact, I was watching that with Paul Rennick, and Paul Rennick turned to me and said, "Did you hear that sound?" And of course, I was like, "No." Like, what? Rewind that. Let me hear that again.
It wasn't a dirty roll, by the way.
No, it wasn't. No, it was a buzz roll. No, I'm not being. Oh, that's that 4 minutes and 30 seconds of the DVD. It's like, no. It was really an interesting sound. So that, things like that spurred me on. 94 high sticking with Blue Devils, the use of space with 93, that minimalism. The early 2000 Cavaliers, things that started to evolve were tempo. You had, as we've had access to amplification and electronics and samples, tempos came to started getting much faster in the early 2000s, late 90s. So that kind of changed, the vocabulary of what we were writing to generate effect. So, when I was asked back to the Cavaliers in 2010, after Jim Casella retired, huge shoes to fill. And I didn't really think I was probably going to do drum corps again after 2009. I didn't know what I was going to do. But they asked me to come back, and I came back. And my thoughts were, we should push this, for better or for worse, as far. And that was the, what show was that? What was the 2010 Cavaliers show? Oh, my gosh.
Mad World?
Mad World. This Is My Rifle. And we just pushed it as far as we could with electronics. I remember Michael Gaines and Bart Woodley and Andy Toth coming in, and we had the amplification set up because I wanted them to hear this MP3 like, you know, live or Memorex, like, you know, and you know, I wanted them to feel that energy. So my take on it is, you know, we should push things as far as we can, because someone's going to pick that up, a young kid, him or her, they're going to take that and run with it, and that to me is how things, you know, the evolution of things. That's how things evolve, I believe. So I'm a big believer in push, 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 push. New textures, try new things. Sometimes it doesn't work, but you know, when it does, it creates something new and interesting, that we can acquiesce to as arrangers, as fans, because I think there's more untapped out there. You know, we just need to keep trying to find it, for sure.
Yeah, and I think, well, the thing that I try to do is like I'll, you know, listen to the Bluecoats, and now I'm going to watch them 3 or 4 times because they're entertaining, but it's inspiring, and it gives me some things to think about. Or watching the Cavaliers. I mean, I just saw a video. It was a keyboard feature when they were moving the keyboards and running around, right? I thought that was awesome, and I kind of posted, man, this is great. But so I watched it to check it out, but also to learn. Like for me, it's I want to constantly learn. And so sometimes it's, you know, kids get on and watch a video and they want to necessarily like, oh, they want to learn the music, but I want to hear the whole thing. I want to hear the snare tuning. There was something with the Bluecoats, I think, when you were there as a tech, Mike, how you tuned the snares. And there was a video that came up, and man, I was like, that's snare tuning. So I think with all of us, I hope, you know, we listen with respect and appreciation, but to grow. Because if you don't do that, it's like then you just kind of stifle and do what you've done, you know. So I want to thank you guys. I mean, it's been awesome to kind of check it out. It is, you know, it's a competition. Someone's got to put numbers down, but like you were just saying, it's like maybe someone taking what you do and running with it. Well, that might be me, or that might be Tom, or that might be, you know, Andrew. So I think hopefully we kind of feed off of each other and, you know, help the activity grow.
Well, the guys on this Zoom make me better. There's just no two ways
Yeah.
about it. I mean, I learned.
Absolutely.
I'm going to come out of this Zoom a better musician. I came out of this Zoom a better musician that first 5 minutes listening to all those Cadets beats. And I just, you put so much energy into the music, Tom. I haven't heard music. I haven't heard beats. You know, I've been writing ballads, so I haven't heard like beats. And they came on, and I was like, it kind of took me back, like Sunscreen and Diesel Fuel and, you know, mowed grass and sunlight and
Food.
people. Yeah, taco in a bag. But yeah, just really, yeah, for sure. Like, there's so much energy from everybody that you can pick up, and sometimes it's touching a hot stove, but at least you learn something, you know. But you take what you like from everybody and you try and infuse that into what you do, and you know, you're just very respectful of the fact that I'm still able to listen to my colleagues and learn a ton, and I hope that never changes, because I find that to be a thread for a lot of successful people, for sure, in every genre.
Definitely. All right, so the young guy here, Andrew, are you 36?
37, just turned
Okay.
months ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right.
upper 30s.
Happy belated 2-month birthday.
Happy belated birthday.
So what is in your young drum corps career here, what's something that, you know, kind of changed away? And you know, Mike was talking about like Blue Devils 94, and I wasn't thinking about that. You know, maybe it's something that you saw a corps do and you went, wow, and that kind of stuck with you in how you wrote or how you taught.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been fortunate growing enough, like drum corps come through Centerville every year for a show, and I've been able to go since I was 3 years old and watch people rehearse, and that's been my exposure to the activity. So, you know, I probably went to the first Soaring Sounds in '86, and I've been hooked ever since. So, you know, obviously the stuff that these guys do has been an influence on me. When I came in writing in drum corps, it was 2007, and it was right in the middle of when amplification was allowed and when electronics were allowed, and that those things definitely take a few years to develop and are still developing. But it's been interesting for me how we've kind of chased the balance through all those choices. So I remember I was an age out in 2004 at Cavaliers, and the amplification thing came. We had like a small microphone on the low end of the marimba, and I think they mic'd the bongos or something like that, and that was it. It was really dipping the toe in as little as you can. Let's get a little bit of boost from some areas we lose upstairs. And I was very influenced by Eric Johnson. I had been a fan of just the presence of the Cavaliers front ensemble in the late 90s, early 2000s. It jumped at me. It was loud, but it wasn't brittle. Like it had a depth to it that I had never heard before. And so I emulated that a lot at first. And he actually was a consultant a little bit with me my first couple of years of writing. That philosophy was a lot about trying to make sure that the way that the front ensemble played matched the intensity of the rest of the drum corps. There are some people that were experimenting with the sound of the amplification, but it was like they played very light, and the sounds that came through the speakers sounded very artificial compared to that of everything else going on. And you watch the players, it's very subdued compared to the high sticking you get out of the battery or the brass who are playing a certain way that they wouldn't play in a concert hall. So it was a matter of using the amplification to kind of make it feel like you had 8 marimbas instead of 4, but still having that aggressive approach to what we were doing. When the synthesizers started getting involved, it changed everything, because now if you had a really acoustic sound coming out of the front paired with this really electric sound coming out of the speakers, that didn't seem to match all that well either. So trying to kind of balance those two things out. And then as people's equipment improved over the last 10 years, it's now gotten to a place where I think, those two elements balance a lot better. And then it was like, oh, the brass just seems a little bit artificial now, or separate from the sound that we're getting out of this other stuff. So now that's starting to come through the speakers a little bit too. And it's been cool because you see people try and fail, or not even fail, but like you get the opportunity. I just feel like we're always chasing something to make it better, which makes me excited to go back and do it the next year, because it makes it even harder this year, because I felt like I learned so much after last summer. I had a really great summer. The drum corps had a really great summer, and we learned what worked, what didn't, and like we had some great momentum going into this next one. It's like now I have to wait a whole other year to learn those lessons that I would have learned in 2020. We're trying to learn as we can in different ways right now, but that part that Mike is saying, that we push and we push, that's part of it, but it's also the excitement of what you don't know, and going back and doing it again when you know more things. So that's what drives me each year.
Well, I think it's I think technology really in probably the last 15, 20 years, just how fast it has exploded, I guess, in the activity. You look at the 70s and the 80s, drums were, the drums are drums, and obviously how you wrote for them and how they fit in the ensemble. But man, just having this this electronic tool, or whatever you want to call it, just open up the garage door, I guess. Instead of the front door, now the garage door is open to, explore different things. One thing I was thinking of when Andrew was talking about, and this is maybe me as an old guy, but going from ticks to a subjective system in '84. And I know people were just against it. It was crazy. I marched in the tick system, and then '84 was very subjective. But looking back, I think it gave designers an opportunity not to be afraid and think outside the box. Because everything you did before that was like, you can't do that. No. You got slapped because you couldn't try some things. Although cores were, I look at Vanguard 80. To me, they were one of the first cores that did asymmetrical drill, and they got slapped on the wrist because it was kind of outside the box. So, 84, when we went to the subjective thing, it was like, now we can explore and move forward. I know a lot of people want to get back to. We should get back to the ticks. We should get back to that. And then I think last year too, having that judge in the front sideline, I was a little old school with that one. Until the end of the season, I went, it wasn't too bad, because it forced us as designers to present the drum line better than we normally would. So I was kind of the opposite after the season was over. I think we need one more person. I think we need someone to sit up there and listen to your products and get the total package. But those are two that I just kind of like, I guess, basic ones that, you know, I think maybe changed how I thought about some things and as a designer. So I want to start getting into your brains a little bit here, and I want to talk about the process that you guys kind of go through before pencil to paper. Now, it could be, you know, what your design team does, or it could be maybe what you do, like, you know, because Andrew writes everything. Like, what is the process before you actually write something on the paper? Mike, you want to go first?
It varies. You know, I'm a big proponent for, you know, you're always listening for opportunity. You know, they say when opportunity knocks, make sure you're listening. I think it's usually knocking. You just got to kind of be open to things. And I'll be on a walk and hear a chord progression, or I listen to music really soft sometimes, and I hear a ton of music inside that music. And I'll just let the music percolate. I'll listen to it. I'll listen to music in that style. And then when I find myself, you know, singing beats or singing, my wife's like, okay, it's time for you to write because you're singing. So when I start singing things, it's like, okay, it's kind of bubbled up and it's ready to come out. But I'm not a big, you know, fan of starting at bar 100 or 1. It's wherever the inspiration strikes, because it's important to get the ink on the page and to get a good start, you know, regardless if you're going to erase it or what have you. I mean, I've spent 2 hours on 4 bars. You know, I've knocked a chart out, like I'm sure we all have, in you know, a couple hours when you're just kind of feeling it. So yeah, it just inspiration is always there. You're just making sure you're listening. You know, I'll go back and start. I've been listening to a ton of drum corps lately, like on YouTube, for inspiration for the marching band things that I'm writing. And yeah, just always open to what's the impetus, what's going to be the thing that kind of the spark, and then once that happens, the levee kind of breaks, and I go from there.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. Tom, how about you?
I guess as far as like the way the process usually works for us, like before we actually write anything, it's usually like over the previous summer, or like long like car drives to finals rehearsals, and there's always just like talk happening, and it's like communication, and we have a meeting or two in the early fall, that kind of thing. And pretty much when we start to get an idea, we just start throwing together like all those ideas, like on some sort of, you know, on a cut track, and just start kind of adding, replacing, massaging, just all that kind of thing. And just sometimes it could be a couple tunes, sometimes it could be like a half hour of music that we just, or ideas and that kind of thing. So I guess the main thing is it's a communal process with all that, just of kind of thinking about a big picture, a kind of a vibe, accessibility for the show, or the music, and that kind of thing. So not a lot of surprises once we actually go to actually write. It's pretty much, it's whittled down and pretty like thought out, at least in terms of the major macro kind of ideas of the show.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think the thing I've learned after doing this for whatever 35, 40 years is you can't say it's going to be this way. Sometimes it's just going to kind of happen. Like you're saying, communication is key. Constantly talking about stuff. I mean, this year we kind of went at it like, which is unusual for me. I like to talk about a concept and then find music, right? Or a story and find music, and the music becomes a soundtrack. This year it was like, you know, because Jay's back and Neil's back, and everyone's like, all right, guys, you guys go find some music, and we'll like go find stuff that inspires you. And I bet we had 50 pieces. And what was really kind of cool was, I mean, I didn't really enjoy when they said that. I was like, really? And then I went, but I enjoyed listening to these pieces and finding stuff that I probably would never listen to unless I was kind of looking for, you know, vintage Cadets, you know, some fast stuff, some intense stuff, you know, a lot of notes, and so we started that way, and then started to, you know, we had Jay, myself, Mark Whitlock, who used to be with us, but he had to leave because of his family, and Neil they came up to Providence, came up here, and we spent a weekend. And I swear to God, it was like, man, we listened to just about everything that's out there. And I dropped Jay off at the airport, and it was like we were exhausted and we didn't feel like we got anywhere. And then all
Right.
of a sudden, there was a spark,
Yeah.
something that happened, and kind of took off. And that was probably after meeting maybe 4, 5, 6 times on a Monday night, and then a whole weekend, and then it was like that kind of thing. So sometimes
Yeah, sometimes you have to like just live with it. I mean, sitting in a room and staring at somebody and going, "Okay, what's the show?" Like,
Yeah.
that doesn't. I mean,
Loud
I can't-
thematic
I can't
material. It's like,
Exactly.
okay, got it. Yeah. Right.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but it's like that. It's that experience though, like that
Yeah.
4 hours of being around people. That's like
Just starts it
it's so
going.
motivating, and just it's that one like offhand thing that somebody even made a joke about or whatever. That becomes the show. Like it's at least in my experience that.
Yeah. Well,
You know.
actually, that's what happened. I think I don't remember who brought something up about like, well, we should do this, and then someone made a joke about, well, we don't want it to be about this movie that with Chubby Chase or whatever. And I went, well, like whatever. But then the next day we came back, and we went to that, but it wasn't about that movie. It
Right.
was about, but it was funny how we got there. It's like, that's stupid. We're not going to do that because we don't want to, we don't want to do this stupid movie. But we ended up thinking about that, and then made it something, I guess a little bit more, we didn't want to do comedy. So it was
Right.
like, we gotta have a little bit more depth to it.
Well, it's like exactly what Mike was talking about. About being open to those things, no matter how they come, or like just being available to have that discussion or accept that idea. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Andrew, because you write everything, is it just you in a room by yourself? Like, okay, well, what do you think? Well, I don't know. I don't want to do this. Well, how about, okay, well, what do you do?
Yeah, that makes it both easier and harder. Does anybody else feel weird when you listen to music with other people in the room? And you're either like it's going on, you don't know where to look. Like
You're like 2 feet away from it. Last time you saw them, they had a tan. You don't even recognize them now. Yeah.
Like I don't want to look at them because then I'll start laughing. I always, especially if it's something you're pitching, like guys, check out this. And then like I don't want to look at their reactions because then it seems weird. But I feel like a lot of the shows develop kind of like what Tom talked about, where it's a ton of 5-minute conversations. I'm with the people that I design with a lot. Like in the summer, we spend a lot of time together. The groups I do in the winter, like it's a lot of times it's the same people I'm with constantly, and it's just these little ideas that pop up, and you allow them to pop up, and you say something, and then it kind of goes on the list of things to consider when you got to dial it in a little bit more. But I feel like those little 5-minute conversations end up somehow coming together to be what the show ends up being. As far as putting the music together, it's weird because I don't have a lot to bounce off of other people. We have a lot of consultants and things like that, but I feel like when I present stuff that I'm working on to especially visual people, it's got to be pretty dialed in for them to know what I'm thinking. So like, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit right now, but like, if the sounds aren't right, if the samples aren't balanced, if the melodies aren't coming through, like I feel like the first time I play something for the team, it's got to be like ready to go. Because then they don't always imagine it the way I want them to, or they get caught on something and decide they hate it, but it's like, well, it won't sound like that because it'll be this. And so I try to do that, but then I feel like the byproduct is I then hand this thing that's really dialed in and nobody wants to say anything, like, because I've worked so hard on it and it's like there. People are going to be like, I think it sucks. And then you end up starting over again. So I battle with that a little bit, I guess, but I'd also rather know sooner rather than later. And, I don't want to get into spring training and then have them be like, I've always hated this. It's like, well, you could have said something.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah. I go as far as to put applause in our MP3s.
Nice.
Just like, hey, this is really going to pay off. And, we usually have about, we're usually on like version 20 to 23 by, April. And then that's kind of the final MP3, but it goes through, 20, every week we have a call religiously, and, you're putting together a new MP3. And you've worked on it for 8 hours, and usually they're coming from a rehearsal, so they're in a drive-through listening to it through their phone. So you've done everything you can to make sure that it's striking, to get your point across. So I totally agree with Andrew on that. But
Yeah.
And then they still would
Go ahead,
prefer
Tom.
to have a recording. They still prefer to have a recording of the horns playing it in the gym at April camp. In my experience.
or it's like it's my lame voice as a placeholder for all the voiceover stuff, and then we get the professional, and they're like, "What happened to, boring dude?" And I was like,
Well,
that's not gonna happen."
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that so the MP3s are great, right? I mean, you can dial it in, but there's nothing better than, whatever, 7280 horns playing, the drum line, keyboards, and some kind of miking system going on because you miss that energy that I think drum corps can bring. I was talking about like watching the Bluecoats last year. Like you couldn't get, if I listened to your MP3 of what I heard you guys do, I probably wouldn't have started clapping. But having the core perform and that energy they present, and I think you're right too. It's like we have MP3s, and I'm in the middle of it. Sometimes it's the visual people. Like I'll play something like check this out, and they're like, and they look at me. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, we don't have the voice in there. It's fine, but check out, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, and then I feel like I screwed up, or it's stupid, or that one drum part doesn't make any, like I start making stuff up in my head. And so this year we've tried to kind of, before we get anything out, make sure we have all that stuff in there so people can kind of imagine the whole thing.
Yep.
One of the things that I tried to do this year was with Jay coming back was, so we had, the opener, the original was, I don't know, 12 minutes, and we had to get it down to 3. Jay and I met, and I talked about sections that were really cool, and I actually made a voiceover for him, right? And then he got it down to 5. And then I went back in before I wrote, and I got it down to 3 and change. And I adjusted some stuff where the percussion were going to go, and kind of made this a little bit bigger and got rid of this section that didn't make any sense. And I did that for a lot of the pieces. Rather than him sitting there and trying to figure out, around here 17 minutes, I got to figure out how to do this and this. I went in, and my sound guy, Brandon Carita, who writes for me at Dartmouth, is my sound guy and the front ensemble guy. So the closer, we just got on Zoom, and I said, all right, I want to play, let's just do this much. Let's do this much. Okay. And he actually made a cut tape, and then I talked over the cut tape. Now, Jay's brilliant. If he listens to it and goes, well, I think we should use this instead of this, I'm cool with that. But I try to narrow it down a little bit so, I'm not putting too much, I'm not putting all of this on his plate. And I do a lot of that with Dartmouth. Like he writes for the band. I try to do all that where I'll get the cut stuff for him, then he'll send it, I'll put it in the Cavaliers, and then I'll tweak it, before I get going. So I think it's different for, different people. And my role now is I'm just a battery arranger and I'm the program facilitator. So it's my job to kind of guide, the kiddies. Like I'm a cat herder, I guess. I'll tell you, sometimes it's like, man, it's like, all right, nope, come on up, no, not come on. Oh my God. Especially with April. I don't know if April's listening, but Tom, you remember April.
I do. Yeah, I'm still scared of her.
Loves me some April. Loves me some April for sure.
She'll find you, dude. She'll find you.
I know.
She married a guy I marched with. I follow both of them on Facebook. It's just so cool. She's not afraid to put it out there, and it's just I love that about her for sure.
All right, so that's kind of before pencil, right? And I'd say I don't mean literally pencil and paper, although I will take the horn score and I'll write stuff over. I'll sketch stuff out before I kind of plug it in. So now, what's your process when you actually gotta put the pencil to paper? I mean, is there a process, or like Mike, you were saying a little earlier, like you may not start on measure 1. You may start over here. Like what kind of inspires you? But so
it's whatever's inspiring me. You gotta, they say like, if you're writing a book, as an author, just get it out there, get the ink on the page, and then you can go back and stay editorial and make it right. But I'm trying to create contrast. I'm trying to create space. I'm trying to create, some beef. And you're trying to pick and choose under the auspice of, drum corps is interesting. It's Transformers, 10, where BOA is a little more of the, film noir, like the art film. You can get away with less in BOA, but you're trying to put 5 pounds of poo in a 3-pound bag in the summer, and you're trying to do it in a way that's musical, and people that are on the Zoom call would hear it and text me and say, "Hey man, nice job with that," So you're trying to do it the right way, whatever that way is. But I remember in 2011, I wrote this. Like 4 bars, and then literally I'm turning my computer off, and I had an idea at WGI Finals, and if I get an idea, I'll put it on my little notes on my iPhone, like I'll sing it sing a chord progression, or I'll sing a rhythm thing, or I'll write down, a thought, and I'd written down decrescendo rimshot DXL. I don't know, why I wrote that, and I went back and I looked at that, and I changed these bars I was working on for most of the night. The last 5 minutes, I literally just wrote this, kick, just for kicks and giggles. And that little blurb ended up being like our calling card that year. So you never know, where inspiration is going to strike and what it's going to be. So, I'm trying to be musical. I'm trying to contrast. I'm trying to throw the kids a bone. I'm trying to throw the judges a bone. I'm trying to be smart about the staging, all while shoving, like I said, 5 pounds of proverbial poo in a 3-pound bag, and create as much demand as and entertainment general effect as possible. And it's usually not right, out of the gate. Rarely does it change, or rarely does it stay the same. I remember in 2008, the boxer show, Tom, that we did, that bass break was much shorter at the beginning, and then we saw the drill, and I'd spent tons of time on the bass drum feature, and then I ended up writing literally like on a bev nap, another 24 counts, like just this is temporary, and that made it to the end, just no thought, no nothing, just here's
Yeah.
the ink to fill those counts. So you just never know. I'm a big proponent of trying to just get it out there, and then obviously like with fashion, with being a movie editor, with anything, a producer, you're staying editorial, the whole time, like just distillate, homogenize, until that version is saying everything it needs to say in the short amount of time it has, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
a process for sure.
I was just, when you were talking, I said, okay, what's mine? And I think for me, when I write, it's about choices. So I have to kind of make a lot of choices. I have to ask a lot of questions to myself, whether, like you were kind of saying, is it a time to lay it on? Is it a time to support? And if I'm going to support, what are the brass playing? Okay, well, that's a little bit too dense. I got to back off. It's more about time. Okay, do I write to, my thing is, I think after doing this for a long time, I stay a lot of times with the low brass. I'll stick in there because the trumpets are usually fragile. The mellophones have a lot of notes. And at least with, the low brass, an ostinato pattern, some kind of groove or something that's kind of wide open. But then I have to decide, like, okay, is this fast? Are we going to do drill? Oh, you think we're going to do some body here? Okay. There's a lot of questions I kind of ask myself, and then choices on, okay, what's going to be cool? What's going to be great for the kids to play? What's going to be stylistically, musically appropriate with all that? When we play a lick and I want to, you're ramming some stuff, and, how do you want people to respond? You want them to go, oh yeah, or like, wow, or, there's just a list of choices and questions that I go through. And it's funny, I was writing the closer before Jay sent it to me, because like I said, I cut it down. So I had this whole section where it was like, dun 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 dun. I took 3 weeks, and every day I'd come in and, I had a lot of time, so I'm in here drumming, and I had it in my head, sketched patterns out, I had papers of stuff. I was like, all right, so I get it. Probably it was before the virtual camp, so probably 2.5 weeks ago. I get it, put it up there, and I listen to it, and I go, oh crap, I can't use any of this, because the music that he sent sounded a little bit different than what we were doing with the original, and some of the stuff that I spent 3 weeks on in my head and on paper, I had to throw in the trash can. But here's the thing, I wrote that, in about 4 hours. And it was a percussion moment of it's about 30 seconds. But it was painful for 3.5 weeks, and I get it, and I was like, but then all of a sudden I was like, bam, I was able to kind of, I guess go after it because the music spoke to me right away. But the stuff that I had before, I was like, that's still in the trash can.
I think that's very important what you just said. You spent, hours and hours on something, and then, and this is Tom Aungst writing this, so it's like, here it is, and then you hear it in real time with the real, with the whole shooting match, and you're like, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
Like you're not so attached to it. It's like it has to work. I spend all this time on it. You see that with a lot of young arrangers where they'll try and connect a dot that's like way far, out there.
Yeah.
And just it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. You can't be married to any of that. You got to be okay with adding 8 counts, on July 16th because the drill needs it. I mean, even though it messes up your perfect opus,
right.
bolero, you got to make it work.
How about you, Tom? What is like when you get the pencil and you're ready to go there? I mean, you're doing the whole deal, so.
Yeah. So I guess it's either like before or during, like when I start, because I'll keep like a loose, like kind of like a spreadsheet, just kind of broken into phrases, and just like so I have like a living kind of document that like. Before I've written a note, I guess I've kind of identified, like, at least preliminarily, what I think the priority for that phrase is. Like for percussively, what the texture might be, what's an identifying instrument, basically whatever the main idea percussively, and then just to give me kind of a guide like through that. But it's not really linear for me either. It's more of a chunk or a chart, that kind of thing. It's more starting with whatever part that speaks to me the most, or like. Invariably there'll be a part that you just kind of hear something, an energy, a rhythm, something that feels good to drum to, and like something that just feels right, and just try and get some kind of a foothold within that section of music. So, and then that tends to inform the things on either side of it, I guess, and the choice. If that's really that important and works out, then maybe some of your choices are made for you, how you get there. You start thinking about visual travel or staging or all those kind of things, but I think and having some kind of charting system or just even like a loose timeline horizontally helps me keep track of that stuff, I guess in between. So that's right. Kind of my process from a macro standpoint.
So I don't know. Do you guys go through this? I go through this where I try not to be myself because I'm like, people, it's like, well, that's Tom Aungst writing. And I go, and instead of me going, well, that's kind of cool, I go, crap. And so what I do is I try to, like Mike, you were saying, it's maybe like connect this dot way up here. But here's the thing, I always come back and bring the dot here. So I might spend a week out here in Mars trying to do something that it's like, well, that doesn't go with the music. And then I hear Hannah on my shoulder, Tom, that doesn't go with the music. I'm like, shit. So I come back but somehow by going out there, I grab a couple little bits. So when I come back to the soup, I add a little bit more pepper and salt, so it's me, but it has a little bit of this on here. Or sometimes I'll sit down and I'm going, all right, here we go. And I'm like, oh shit, how did I do this? I've been doing this for 40 years. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I can't even hold the sticks. The sticks just fell on the ground.
I swear I don't even think I have a signature style. I don't even know what that would be. I mean, I think one year it's a theme, one year it's a lick, one year it's a progression, one year it's none of the above. One year it's space. I don't know.
Right.
Try to write what the music calls for, but I couldn't tell you what my style is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe someone else hears it differently. I don't know.
Maybe
that's. Go ahead, Andrew.
That's a sign of the times. Like, one thing you talked about how drum lines had such a distinct style that was different from all the other ones, and that's something I felt even just growing up in the 90s watching all the drum lines, like different techniques, different tuning, different sounds, different roles in the show. And I think that a lot of that's, I think maybe for the sake of competition, gone away. Like I think certain styles and certain ways of doing things have become either more fashionable or actually better in some cases, as far as creating sounds and things like that. And I think that's made all the arranging, the activity, I don't want to say it's more homogenous because that's not necessarily it, but less distinct. It's I would say the same thing about the way I write, Mike. Like I feel like it's different every year. Like
Right.
I feel like I don't know that I'm chasing a certain style or anything like that, but I feel like, I write to what the show is, and I try to do that justice. But I do also think that's just kind of common. There are definitely drum lines that I could tell who wrote it because of very specific things. But as an activity as a whole, I feel like maybe we tend to go out of our comfort zone a little bit more than we used to.
Yeah.
So, some of that's time management too. Like to get something, when you watch Tom or Eric play a field drum, there's a certain type of style. And, do we have the time to teach a certain style that's idiomatically correct for this part of the show? And then again, bringing back the editorial thing, should we make that just 35 seconds and maybe it's just the snares? So the essence of that style and that idiomaticity is there, but you're staying, in the moment with, we don't have all the time in the world to clean this, so we are kind of on a schedule in the summer. So you're trying to make all those things line up to create something that, the judging community is going to go, wow, that's super spot on. And the crowd, your peers are going to go, that was really cool stylistically. But
Yep.
it's hard to do because it takes a lot of time, to get out of your comfort zone. If you've been doing a certain way your hands move and you want to try something else just for a certain section, to some people that scares them because you're getting them outside of their ability to, how they clean kind of thing, So you're trying to be wary of your staff and, time.
Yeah. Well,
I find a lot of that comes from like the staff members though, like the members themselves and the staff. Those guys teach all. I mean, for all of our corps, I'm sure they teach all over the place. Like they all the members march in different WGI lines together and everything. It's much more. I don't know. That stuff inspires me, like, or just changes the way that, like, it's more of a bottom up is the wrong way to say it, but you know what I mean. Like from that membership performance level to the teaching staff to like, and then it gets like into my psyche or my, some of that filters into like how I write or how I see things or imagine things when I see it on the screen, or like if I'm playing and just go, oh, I can envision the line playing at this because I've seen them do something like that. So,
right. You're inspired by them to produce
absolutely.
something. Yeah.
And the vocabulary is so readily available now. Like, back in the past, you were taught by a certain person, a certain style, and you were, given that vocabulary, and then that kind of set you on your path. But now it's like everybody can easily get information on how to do anything just by getting on YouTube or getting in contact with people. So I think that's also changed the way that we approach things because there's just so much more communication happening. No more secrets. Those secrets all get divulged, and things like this are all over the place, and so everybody knows everything, and it makes it even more challenging then to figure out a way to stand out and do something creative and take something an activity that inherently has a lot of tradition and things that people are looking forward to when they go to see a drum corps show, but also at the same time surprising them.
Yeah. Well, actually staying with you, Andrew, so what is your, you put pencil to paper, what do you before, well, here's the thing, before, either Neil would write or right now it's Brandon, it's me sitting down, it's Jay first, then I sit down, and what I do is I'll sketch out keyboard stuff, like if I want to, because we want to try to stay as coordinated as we can, or sometimes I'll write something on there because I want him to be creative. I don't want to stifle his creativity. So sometimes I have to kind of watch.
Yeah.
But if I want something to line up rhythmically or want something that is a percussion ensemble thing that I want people to get, I'll sketch that out. And what's nice too is, Neil and I wrote together for 17 years with the Cadets, almost 10 years at Dartmouth. And so we could get on the phone and I could just say one thing and he could write 2 minutes. Or we'd get together and his body language and my body language is like, okay, like he just, it's nice to have that. This guy, Brandon, that I have now, it's nice, written at Dartmouth, and I have Neil here kind of whispering in both of our ears, like, are you sure you want to do that? Or can we try this? And so that part's nice. But I guess getting back to you, what's your process? Do you go horns and then you go drums and then, or it's like whatever comes into your mind?
I tend to go with what's most important for each part of the show as you go through it. I I think a little bit more holistically first, like where the melody is and how that's being supported. And then I tend to fill out the priority for each part and then supplement that afterwards to make it sound better. And I think I aired early on, going back to when I was at Crown, I was just doing the front ensemble. There's an environment where I felt like everybody was kind of pushing and advocating for their section and trying to get your moments and saying, we're not showing the front ensemble enough in this show. You need to give me more here. And you would argue about that. And you try to, the result of that was that every moment you got, you would kind of take full advantage of it. And it was just kind of a different mindset. And then when I first started doing the whole music score at Crossmen, I didn't have that stress, and I just kind of wrote it so that it sounded really good to me, and maybe erred on the side of going for the coordination aspect and didn't have, Lee Bettis on one shoulder, Michael Klesher on the other, and all these things where you would maybe. So I kind of had to make believe for myself as I've learned. It's like, all right, if I were the battery guy, how would I be fighting for this part of the show? And think a little bit differently, and I think it's helped in writing things a little bit, just allowing for the space for each section to have those moments rather than being excited about the fact that everything is going to coordinate really well because I can make it happen that way.
Right.
So that's been kind of an evolution over the last 5 or 6 years, but I just kind of, whatever is the most important part tends to be what I get drawn to first for that minute of the show, and then kind of develop around that. And maybe it's not even that specific. Maybe it's a trumpet line and a marimba thing and the battery, or maybe it's a drum set that's the important groove pushing element of that part, and then I write the battery parts to fit around that. And it's just always different. And then once there's something complete there, I usually let it sit for a while and come back to it, and then I try to tear it apart a little bit. I think most people on this call, I worked with Scott Coder for a long time. He was a consultant at Centerville when I first started writing my very first notes ever. And I would send him stuff, and he would shred it to bits, very, very politely.
Yeah.
But it was awesome because he gave you the old take this with a grain of salt, and then give you really strongly worded reasons for why you need to change and do these things. So I eventually learned what he would want me to do, and then I kind of got into a certain way of doing things. And then I kind of moved to working with some different people, and it was like that didn't always fit with that. And so I've tried to take all these different editorial processes of these mentors and people that have had, Tom Hannum was another big one while I was at Crown. And, he would cue a lot of things for the front ensemble, too many things, so many things that I didn't have enough people for him, and I didn't have any room to write the things I wanted to write. And I had to somehow make that all work. But it was extremely well thought out and detailed. And, I think when I'm in that situation, I've done well when I've had someone consider what I do throughout the entire production, even if the notes aren't what they need to be. Like, here's a cued pit line. It's there. There's a lot of stuff going on. Do whatever you want with it, but it's thought of and it's there. It's a part of the music. I work with J.D. Shaw at Vandergrift High School, and he kind of writes a lot of the stuff. Like, there are lines and lines of percussion material. I end up not using a lot of the specific notes, but the role that they have and the way that he put the music together stays, and that makes me a lot more successful because I'm not just keeping the kids busy, or I'm not just trying to find ways to not ruin the music. And that's the hard part for percussion arrangers, not ruining the music.
Yeah. Well, there's some questions that are coming up, and I'm going to stick with you, Andrew. So for Andrew, as a percussionist who writes winds in percussion, what's the best way to learn the limitations of the winds of wind players and understand the challenges of what wind players do? I think it's a great question because, that's a big thing. Like, writing stuff, like, Jay is, I think, brilliant with that. He understands like a key you have to be in, or that's too high for this, or you don't have the players for that. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I would talk to successful band directors. I would I would talk to them more than successful arrangers. Because what I've learned a lot through working with certain programs is that a lot of times the band directors will just take what score they're given and then they'll edit it and make it work, without putting that on the arranger. And then what they end up doing is making a band-friendly version of the genius work that your arranger put together for you. And then I try to remember all those things as I notice them happening. But there are people now that I think make a living as consultants that do that, where they'll take a show and be like, all right, I'm going to make this. People do it for drill too. I'm going to make this so you can clean it in half the time, but it mostly sounds exactly like the arranger intended. So, people that have been successful in making their bands do those things are, I think, the best resources.
Yeah. There's another question here, I think which is really good too. And I was like, as we're talking, I was reading this. So how much coordination goes on between the percussion and the front ensemble arrangers and the brass arrangers? I don't know. Someone want to tackle that one? I have a thought. Mike, you want to tackle it maybe?
It's a ton. I've been really lucky with working with some really talented brass arrangers, Doug Thrower, Richard Saucedo, and Drew Shanefield and Mike Martin. And I feel the best relationships or the best writing happen because of the level of trust between the brass and the percussion. And I tell you, even at the Cavaliers, Danny Wiles, who's the artistic coordinator, he and I will just start singing stuff over the phone to each other. I'm going to the store and he calls me, and that's kind of how that 2017 closer happened, where we put Sinatra over Mars. I said, I've got this idea, the ultimate, Frank Sinatra. What if we thought about putting him into Mars? And we just started singing stuff to each other over the day, and within about an hour, I had a kind of a really nasty, rough cut of that. But it becomes something that way. Richard, I think Jay is really about, Jay Bocook is really about these amazing key changes that make the music move forward and
Yep.
create energy and presence. Richard writes in the key of C. It's all accidentals. It's crazy. Sometimes I'll be like, I have no idea where the tonal center of this is. I'm F sharp. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's see if I'm close. But you've got that intimacy. I think is what makes it work, because it feels like it came from the same quill. The brass and the percussion. And of course, I'm sure we all have our little things, that we do to generate that clarity and that sensibility. Like if the mellophones are playing, I don't even look at them. You only encourage them. Like we don't even drum while the mellows play. Little things like that. If the baritones are above the staff, I'm being careful with drum 4 and the quads. All these little tiny, micro details. But the trust thing is huge. And knowing everybody has idiosyncrasies. I know Doug Thrower is very. When he does put pen to paper, like it's usually like has been worked out in his head and thought through. So it's real close. And then other arrangers I've worked with are throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks, and you're just working through that with them together, and you never know what's gonna to bubble up from that. And you have a great staff, you've hired great people, and you know that they can clean it, so you kind of have a confidence in saying, this is really different, but maybe we should try this.
Well, something you were saying, and I think, well, I want to say this. For all of us, we wanted to sound like it comes from one mind. Like the way Andrew does it really is, that's kind of how we want it to come out, right? Like just one person kind of wrote this. But you were talking about like knowing, I don't know how you said it, but kind of knowing the sections maybe. So, I'll talk about Dartmouth. We usually have between 20 and 25 woodwinds, flutes and clarinets together. We do a woodwind feature. Well, if they're playing forte, which they have to because we don't have that many woodwinds, and I'm trying to accompany them, well, if it's the tenors, it's got to be not a lot of stuff. I might use some felts, and the loudest they might play is mezzo forte. I know that just from doing it
Experience.
for a while. Like low brass. If I play with the low brass, because we have 5 tubas, usually 5 trombones and whatever, I can come pretty close, but I still have to be careful because of not the size of the drum line necessarily, but the density of what they're playing. So you just kind of learn these little things, like right off the bat, you go, yeah, what this section's playing, like trumpets. I try to stay, like I said, try to stay away from them because they are fragile. And if I start like mimicking or trying to do something that's like them, like if they do a particular articulation, forget it. Just try to do something that is more supportive and not, unless it's crown. Unless it's crown's horn line. Like Hannah, when I first got there, I'm like, Tom, the horn line's playing forte and you have 3 Fs on the page. He goes, wait. Right? And they played forte and I was like, is the drum line playing? And he had to learn how to write for that horn line. So it's like it's in knowing what you're writing for, the instruments, I guess the group itself is important. And I think this whole thing about coordinating, for me, it's like being back at the Cadets. It's like I feel like it kind of comes from me. So even though I don't write the brass or the front ensemble stuff, how we're going to kind of put it together it starts with me, and then Jay does his thing, and I do mine and bring Brandon in, and because I feel like it has to sound like if Andrew was writing it. I mean, that's what we really want. So, and like you said, Mike, it's like constant conversations. Calling Jay up at like 2 PM or something, and say, hey man, is it okay if yep, or no, you better be careful of that, or it's just constant dialogue. And I think like with a lot of bands, you see, if they have that, they're probably really good. If they don't have that, you go, they're probably drum part, horn part kind of thing, So I got a question for you, Tom, that I don't want to forget here. I kind of wrote it down. So you write the drumline stuff and then the front ensemble stuff. Now, I don't know if this is a myth, but I heard that you wrote horn stuff too. And there were other people that were involved in writing, which I think is cool. Like I don't know if this is like the color guard activity for me seems to be you bring in 10 writers and the production writes sections of the show. That's how someone explained to me that you guys kind of do. Is that a myth?
It's not really. I can explain it better, I guess. I think like between myself, Doug, Matt Jordan, who's the music coordinator, and before him, Vince Oliver did that same role. But I think we worked kind of like just between the 3 of us pretty seamlessly, I guess, is what maybe someone was referring to. Like I'll do something, or like Doug will do stuff with very detailed percussion kind of stuff or sketches. I'll do things where if it's percussion centric, where I'll plot in like who, in general terms, like who's playing, maybe what they play, and then it would the same way where he would give me cues, and then I would just run with that. And there's back and forth. That's more, I guess, what that person was trying to convey. But,
Yeah, well,
but I would never say I'm writing horn parts. That's for sure. But I mean, I guess all 3 of us that design, the music are part of putting every phrase together in some way like that. So
yeah. Well,
it's not just like a 1, 2, 3.
It's probably what a lot of us do. In this one production, which is a lot of percussion, I needed to end with the horns kind of playing a chord and whatever. So I'm like, I can do this. So and if I can't, then people make fun of me, and Jay goes, I can fix it. So I did it, and I sent it to Jay, and I said, hey man, just check this chord out. And so we had a Monday night call, and he goes, Tom, you nailed it. It was like I tried to like mess around with it, but the voicing was perfect. And I go,
Nice.
And I have no idea. I think it was just being knowing what I was doing there, and maybe taking a harmony or something before that. And I was just in a way, I was trying to be cute, and I nailed it. And I was like, yeah. But I think a lot of us do that. Like we'll cue stuff up, and then I'll let Jay or whoever go back in and it's in the wrong octave or whatever. But
a perfect example of that was like last year, the beginning of the closer was like a percussion moment based on Come Together, the Beatles tune.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be percussion driven, obviously. For Doug to write that vamp, the boom, boom, the gonna be like, for him to do that, he could write that obviously, but I had to get in there and do what would kind of work from a percussive flow, and made more sense for me to go first and provide a structure. And then we kind of go back and forth after I get something in general terms, then we go back and forth about what makes sense for the tubas then, or, you know.
Yeah.
So it's more of a collaborative thing like that. So,
I mean, do you guys allow some of your techs to do some stuff? You know, like over the years, and even my high school kids, I've had some great tenor players, you know, and I just go, you know what? Here's 32 counts. Here's a sketch. Go away, you know, kind of own it, come back, and then we'll doctor it up. You know, and I've kind of done that. You know, I'm not a tenor player. I mean, I can write this stuff, but you know, you kind of use your resources, your guys. I mean, you guys, you know, and I'm just saying tenor players, but it could be snare, it could be keyboard. I mean,
it happens more for me for sure with tenors and like specific keyboard moments, I think. For me, because I can voice things. Obviously, I have a tenor pad. I go bleep, bloop, boop, beep, you know, like I'm a sternomer, like.
Right.
But I mean, I try, and I think it's important to like have to make that try and continue to learn and what makes sense. But those guys do so much cool stuff, and like as long as I mean, there's certain parts we'll say, okay, the voicing is really important here. This goes with this. Understand where you fit in the ensemble, but there's other things that they want to change, a drum 3 and drum 4 and cross, whatever. Like that stuff looks cool. It's fun for them to play. Like I have no issues with that. And then there are projects, you know, features and that kind of stuff. I think those are great times for the members, the instructors, people that to have a little bit of ownership and to, you know, when it's appropriate, you know, with all that. Sorry, good.
Sorry, Tom. I was just going to say, well, that ownership, asking for input from your staff, asking for input from membership, you know, they'll come up to you after a lunch break and show you a new sticking on the hair toe lick, and you're like, that's totally going in.
Right.
And then that child, that's their favorite part of the show. Like they own, there's ownership there, there's personality there. So yeah, I mean, that collaboration, that trust is important. Now, the other side of that is, you know, God forbid we write, you know, 16 counts on drum 3, because you come back after dinner and it's like, you know, octopus, and you're like, no, that was supposed to be on drum 3. Sorry, I didn't, you know. I've actually in scores said, don't voice this, like it's on drum 3 for a reason, you know, it's texture. But you know, I'm the same way, you know, I'm watching videos, I'm taking screenshots, making myself little notes. That's the cool thing I'm talking about, you know. And then you look at the page and you're like, that looks nothing like what they played. Like I would never write that. So you're trying to come up with the next cool thing, and I always try to filter it through it's always the quad people, you know, like here's the opener, I'd like to send it out to, you know, in 2 days. What are your thoughts on the arounds kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I think too, it's like it's good to use your guys, right? Because like you said, you know, they feel empowered, which is good because you want them to feel like they're part of the process. But you know, a couple things that, you know, I guess doing it for such a long time, it's like, you know, it's like maybe doing a quad feature where, you know, yeah, well, you probably should have used a metronome on that one, you know, or can we really play that one? Or yeah, you know what? That's going to be behind the horns, and you know, we probably need to not do it like that. Or like voice leading. I like voice leading. I still like to hear the tenors kind of down the line to the bass drum sometimes. You know, like I guess old school float Spirit of Atlanta. You know, like that kind of voice leading. You know, so sometimes it's like it's just, I guess, balancing things out. You know, I think it's time to kind of go, whoa, like that's incredible with what the tenors are doing, even the basses. And my thing is like, all right, if you want to do that, then you better show me. They got to play it. They got to play it with a quality and a clarity and music, and they have to have some type of musicianship with this thing. If you can show me and be consistent, I'll buy it. And they go, well, when do we have by? I say, well, let's see, it's 9. How about 3 o'clock this afternoon? I want some semblance, you know. And then sometimes it'll all work out, and then sometimes because of staging. So here's a good question from Eric Berry, who's one of my quad players from Cadets. Yo, Eric. Says, do you ever feel like the staging drill changes your music in a way you didn't want to? And that's a definite. You know, Mike.
Yeah. I mean, of course, yeah. And you know, the visual writer, the drill writer could say the same thing. You know, the music didn't fit the drill in their mind. So that's where you can't be attached. You know, you've got to stay editorial and collaborative for sure. Because, you know, when you start measuring, when you start like the great shows, you can measure the pacing in seconds and not count sometimes. And you know, sometimes this certain amount of counts, it falls out of the you know, the comfort zone of, you know, Western music. It's like, well, this is going to be a 19 count phrase. That's how many counts we needed. Could we make that work? And you know, it's like, I would never write that, but absolutely, yeah, let's try that. It's just, you know, if you push back, then the drum lines, you know,
Yeah.
in the back 40 in the closer, you know, that's what you get. You know, so I mean, no one would ever do that, but you try and be open to that because it is a give and take for sure.
Well,
Absolutely.
and the thing I've learned is stuff that I used to have issues with in the 90s, early 2000s, let's say. I don't now because the players are better, the cores are better. Um, you know, sometimes, you know, like we all know, like, you know, sometimes to have the whole drum line in a line, a straight line, and the bass, you know, bass five is, you know, he's 40 yards from the end tenor. It's hard to play on that, but it's a look, it's a strength. Okay, you know, and so sometimes it's a balance. Like if we played 3 minutes in that, I think I might have to jump off a bridge. But it's a little give and take. It's like, all right, can we get the bases behind? Can we get in this? All right, that's cool, you know. And we just did that on Monday night with John Bilby, who's writing the drill for us, and he's been awesome. And he says, you know, this is kind of a look, and I said, yeah, let's do it, you know. But I said, can we get the bases in here because of what we're playing? It's gonna sound stronger. So
Yeah.
and you know, some stuff that I hung with, like I said in the '90s, where I go, you know, I let it go because the players are better, you know, and they can handle it. So, Mike, did you have something?
No, I totally agree.
Yeah. Let's see here. From John, snares, tenors, or basses, what's your favorite to write for? Andrew, what do you got? I know you know, you do the whole thing, but out of those instruments, what do you got?
I feel most comfortable writing the parts on the snare drum. Um, I I have found though that like there are some times when a marching band doesn't have a quad line, and I struggle because that's kind of the voice for me that just glues everything together, and I probably have the most fun adding that voice in there to give it some variety. And I find with the snares and basses, like you can write some cool grooves and things like that, but to me that's the one that transforms the way it sounds more than anything else. So I kind of a two-part answer, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, Tom, how about you?
Kind of the same. I mean, I'm certainly most comfortable. I mean, when I play along, I play snare drum like when I'm writing. I don't necessarily play.
Right.
I sing bass parts. I play snare drum parts on my pad, and I peck around poorly on a tenor pad. So snare is definitely the most fun. But yeah, I find that too. Like with the tenor thing, like certainly miss that voice when it's not there. I find that it has such an ability to dance, to live in both worlds, like to dance around and I think complement the bass drums in that kind of low to mid frequency, be part of that treble kind of thing, and then just and really effortlessly, just modulate in between all those, and that's a fun tool to use, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So to you, Mike, do you feel like part of your writing is and maybe you don't think about it, you write as a tech because you were a tech for a lot of years. Do you write like that? I mean, I do.
Yeah, I feel, well, you know, as we've had some conversations, and you'd be like, man, there's just nothing better getting up in the morning, having your coffee, having your drum pad, you know, and getting after it. And, you know, my stuff is probably better when I'm drumming through it, you know, all the time. Because you'll find stuff, it's like, oh, wow, I can't believe I wrote that sticking. That does not feel good at all. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm cursed with, and Tom, all of us are probably the same way. Like you still have a little bit of a semblance of chops, so you can kind of hack your way through it. And you know, sometimes it's a blessing, and you know, sometimes that's a curse. You know, just real quick, your previous question, I think I would have to answer that I enjoy writing for the bass drums. because it's the frequency you really hear before you see the drum line. You know, you kind of feel it. And, you know, I've just always been a fan of the bass line, you know, moving some stuff around for sure. And they're a weird group, the bass drums. Their own.
Hey, I got the holy bass
breed of-
here, man. I got the
breed of-
holy
breed
bass
of-
going on.
Right. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, they're their own, you know, the nation
yeah.
of bass. And, you know, you got to just respect the heck out of that for sure. But, you know, the bass drum thing, you know, taking some chances with that regarding splits. I think that's the instrument, by the way, and, you know, pardon me if this is incorrect. In my opinion, hand cymbals, you know, Tom Hannum did a ton with hand cymbals, Santa Clara back in the day. Where cymbals are going now, it used to be like, man, we don't have any notes. Now it's like, we had 4 crashes in that tune. What were you thinking? You know, we just wanted to do 2, you know, the opening crash and the release, you know, because the cymbal thing now is about what's happening in the spaces visually. But, you know, taking some chances with the bass drum the bass drum artistry in the last 10 years to me has just gone through the roof with what high school kids are doing, what drum corps are doing, what WGI is doing. It's been incredible. So, you know, that's a fun instrument for sure.
Yeah. Who's
Advanced
another?
really quickly recently.
Good, Andrew. I'm sorry, but
I was gonna say the skill set has advanced so quickly, so recently. Like things that used to be really, really challenging for the top lines back 5-10 years ago are just pretty much expected out of every single, you know, open class WGI group now. It's amazing that that skill has just changed and become so advanced so quickly.
And that's a basics, you know, what is now considered a basic bass drum skill is unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah,
crazy.
it's hard to find something that they can't do, honestly.
Yeah.
Or like, and honestly, like the density and the frequency that they're equipped to do as musicians and how good they are, it surpasses the capabilities of the instruments. I think so. That's the problem that I have at times.
Yeah.
Like,
We're
because
there.
it turns into rumble for sure.
Yeah.
Like, but they're playing the heck out of it, you know.
right.
I could never play that. I mean, I could never
Right.
be on the E's and O's for, you know, 4 minutes. There's just no
Well,
way.
one of the things that we're stressing, I guess, with particularly the bass drummers at Cadets is, you know, what made the holy bass thing, dynasty, whatever you want to call it, great. If you listen back, it wasn't the technical splits. It was the quality of each individual and what they played. And you know, I've always believed that, you know, if you're a great snare drummer, it's easy to teach your bass drum technique. If you come in and you got great bass drum technique and you don't have drumming skills or ability, man, it's like, yeah, you can play some of these splits, but when you get into trying to, you know, have a quality or be consistent with how you're playing, you're probably not going to be able to do that. So we do a lot of stuff just flat drums. Like we do video stuff where they have to, you know, get their hands going. Dartmouth, you know, now with the Zoom stuff for 15 weeks, and not like I'm counting, guys, but, you know, they're not doing bass drum. We're doing all flat stuff. I had them learn all the snare stuff to make them better drummers. Keyboard players, same thing, you know. And the other thing that we're pushing too with bass drumming is sometimes, again, it's not about this, you know, you split this whole thing. It's like, is it appropriate with what's going on musically? Does it make sense? Can you, like sometimes, you know, I don't know where I got this from, but maybe sometimes it's cool to hang around for about 8 counts with the top bass and mimic it with the snares. Or sometimes it's kind of just cool to have 16ths where you're playing 2s and it's laying down a foundation for something that the tenors are playing, you know? And like you were saying, sometimes with the bass stuff, Tom, and this maybe it's my age, but you lose the clarity of it. You know, it's almost like, now I think there's times for that. If you can open up a window and it's appropriate maybe and it makes sense, you know, you play, you know, some of the hardest licks ever. But, and you know, like one of the questions on here was something, how much has WGI inspired you to write? I think all of us, it has inspired us a lot, right?
100%.
Through the roof. But then on the other hand, it's like, it's I always think clarity of the ensemble, quality, and then cleanliness. You got to look at those 3 things. If that's coming across, and musicianship, right? If that's coming across, then you're good. You know, however that split works, you know, then you're good. But yeah, I'm kind of blown away. I think the tenor thing and the bass drum thing is just kind of going through the roof, you know, and that's maybe because I I never played either of those instruments. So here's a question from Mike. Do you find that it forces you to be more creative or more frustrated when the demands of the visual designers force you to rearrange or reimagine your original concept for your show? So, I mean, to me, it's maybe you're not communicating. There isn't enough give and take. I mean, right now, again, with John Bilby and Jeff Sackdick's been a consultant. We get the pieware and I'll talk about what I'm looking for. And I'll say, hey, can we get, yeah, okay. And he wants to, and I go, yeah, that's fine. And, I think now we have the ability to look at the stuff and either fix it from our end or they fix it from their end. But I think it's kind of a little bit of a give and take. I don't know how you guys feel on that, right? I mean,
I feel like we give drill writers the hardest job in the world because they're usually the last piece of the puzzle. And it's like, here's all our stuff. We need these guard transitions. We need the drum line here. We need the brass to be able to do this. We need this company front at the end. We need all these things. Here's the props, blah, 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 blah. Don't screw it up, And then they end up having to be in a position where it's like...
You got 5 weeks.
Right. They have to try to make all these people happy and at the same time do something that creatively they're happy with and feel invested in. And, I think the key to that all working is constant communication. I think one thing, like you said, with technology, like I've been able to go back and forth with the drill in January and have conversations and do the give and take then and try to get as much of that taken care of so that by the time you get to the point where the members are learning it, you're not having arguments, you're not trying to make changes, and you're not wasting rehearsal time that is always so valuable. So I always feel for the drill writers, it's a tough gig, and I think that they get the most blame but never the most credit for making all those things happen and trying to make a bunch of unreasonable people happy.
Well, the successful formula to me is if you want to be in the conversation for drums, the color guard has got to be in the right spot. It's like the Monty Python, what's your favorite color? Blue, no green, like to cross the bridge, you've got to have this certain criteria. And, if the color guard is not right, then the drum staging doesn't matter. And working with Richard Henshaw, Danny Wiles, Richard will send me 10, 12 charts at a time. And I'll be like, could we try this? Could you move the quads 4 steps back here? Could we step off 2 counts later? So we're kind of like Andrew said, we're getting all those little details out of the way. When I get scared is when he doesn't email me back, and I'm like, oh man, he's got an idea. It's like, okay, so last year we played Rouse's Gorgon, which is not rooted in melody, it's rooted in tonal texture. It's like it's very percussive, because it's rhythmically driven, rhythmically effective. And I'd written this really cute, accompaniment for the brass, and thinking, oh man, we're going to be 4 steps off the front sideline, next 2, and we're going to support, but we're going to, steal the show as well and be a part, have our little thing. And then I got the drill and we were in the back. And so I spent like the first, and it's cool. It's like, I get it. He's going to throw me a bone in about 3 minutes down the road in the show kind of thing. But, it's like we have this idea for this whole From Chaos Comes Order, this big conceptual thing. We need the percussion in the back to help support. So I rewrote all those parts. And if you watch a video of the drum line in the lot, the parts are pretty boring. I mean, they're very, very supportive. They're very big, because it's all like major 2D kind of unison rhythms. Nothing super exciting about it. And you get the little comments, in the comment section about, this sucks, or, this who wrote this? Like, had to take one for the team.
Never read
here.
those.
Yeah. That wasn't me. That was a
yeah. And, it's like, I can't believe my wife posted that my music sucked. I mean, really, Joy? Like, what the heck? But then you hear it in context, and you're like, that was the right choice, because the sum of the whole kind of greater than the parts. But it was hard to all that, 3 weeks of coffee and drumming and details and, look at it for 2 hours and change one tenor note. And then in the span of 5 days, it's like, okay, that's all got to go away. But it's not about the percussion all the time. It's about the coordinated effort. Yeah. you know, if you're marching at 192 the whole show, that velocity becomes, you know, stagnates. You know, it's not fresh by minute 7 if you play loud the whole time. You know, so those contrasts where the percussion are supportive and then you're you know, the primary, I think that's important to create, you know, a lot of variety as you're moving horizontally kind of through the show.
Yeah. I was just thinking about something. So, you know, like when I'm drumming and I'm writing, I'm doing my thing, I'm laying it out. I mean, the temperature goes from, if it's 70 in here, it'll go up to like 94 degrees. I get sweaty and I'm doing it like they're doing it, right? I'm like, you know, I'm like, this is gonna be awesome, right? Send out to the kids, go down to a camp. This happened at the last camp, so we started playing some of the opener. I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm like, oh, cool. And so then I'm looking around at the techs and I'm looking at whoever, and I'm like, okay, this must suck. I must be like in a vacuum right now, and they're all. It's almost like I got two guys over here talking. I'm like, they're not even paying attention.
No, they're
Some of the best stuff I've written. What the hell's going on here? You know, it's almost like I want someone to go, Tom, man, that's awesome. And I think sometimes it's like, you know, they heard the tenor tick, or they saw a snare drummer, and I'm listening to the music and listen to the whole thing. And so sometimes I'll go over and prompt it. I'll go, so that's pretty cool, I think. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, Jesus Christ, really? It took me freaking 2 months to write like a minute.
Yeah.
I need you to get, like, it was really cool. My son, my oldest son, who's one of my snare tech, he's called me on these Zoom live streaming. He's that was awesome. Or like after he heard the music, man, the snare feature in this tune is awesome. And I'm going, yeah. Like I want a little bit of that. And sometimes it's like, don't you like this? And it's almost like maybe they expect it to be a certain way. But sometimes I want to go, you know, hey, can you just pat me on the back? I spent 2 months on that. Maybe it does suck, but just lie to me. Do you guys ever go through some of that, like when it's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's lonely, I guess, right?
It's lonely, very lonely in the box. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and you know, you start seeing like the faces of the kids that are getting ready to get on a plane to go to camp, and you're still writing, and like it's, but you know, all those kind of, you know, anxieties, and it's like, this isn't good enough. You know, this isn't good enough for the core. It's like, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, but then you get there and you realize nobody really cares how the sausage is made. And
yeah.
That's your struggle to go through, and that's what makes like seeing on the field like even better in a way. Like, you know?
That is so funny, Tom. You're on bar 70 and like some kid's tweeting he just got off the plane for pickup at camp. You're like, oh my God!
It's like vein just popping out of my like, oh my God. Yeah.
How about the one where it's everyone tells you they love it, and then like the first bad drum number comes out on the recap, and they're like, "Well, it kind of sucks." It's
Yeah.
like, oh, you said you loved it. What are you talking about now?
Or they don't even walk over near you.
Right?
Wait a minute, guys. We all liked this like yesterday.
Where were you?
All right. Got a couple other questions here from Mr. Larrabee, my buddy.
Oh boy.
What would you like to see added to DCI percussion ensemble? Is there anything missing?
A judge upstairs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, like I said, I think having the guy down like it was, and we've kind of forced ourselves to stage differently. I can live with that, but I think you're missing the big picture thing. I mean, some of the stuff like when you're up there, the nuance, you know, the tenors matching with the keyboards, the tenors matching with this section or whatever, you know, and all the detail that we put into it. You don't get that from a brass person. You don't, unless it's, you know,
Well,
there's a lot of great guys out there, but I mean, if you have a percussion guy focusing on the percussion ensemble and how it mixes, I think we're missing that. Tom?
when we all write, we're filtering through like a larger context, like our percussive voice through that context of the show, through the brass, through electronics, through everything. And then it feels like percussion only gets judged through a microscope at times. You know, even where they are now, they're sampling more. I thought last year was an improvement for sure. Like just being able to hear and take in, you know, the full complement, you know, percussively more often. But I still think there's something lost in translation, I guess. You know,
I don't know why. Remember 2016 P2? guy upstairs. So
Yeah.
you get tapes. It's like, the horn line. I'm a crown, right? So man, it's really cool, but I can't hear the 3 drum out of the tenors. Like what?
Yeah.
3 drum.
The marimba's about
The low end of the snares, I can only hear the accents. I can't hear. I'm going in the critiques, going, what? Like when do we
Yeah.
ever judge like that? Now here's the thing. Looking back, I go, you know what? I'm glad that happened because it was the stupidest thing I've ever experienced. So I could tell people how stupid that was. Seriously, I was like, what are you talking about? But
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, it wasn't those guys. It was, that's the way we should judge this sheet. And I was like, okay, really? Like, who told someone to do that? I mean, you guys remember that?
Yeah.
I think people
Sure.
were trying to, like it.
Yeah.
Vividly. Yeah.
It was the problem that the person on the field had a composition number, which I've always had a problem with because it's like, well, they're not really judging the composition; they're judging bits of it, apart from each other throughout the entire show. And so it came to a thing where they're like, well, if we're gonna have one judge that we can afford at a show, if they're writing down a comp number, it makes sense to have them upstairs. But then they judged it like they're on the field and didn't take into effect the context of the ensemble. So
Right.
it was almost like they didn't like the situation. So I don't know. I don't want to point any fingers. It just seemed like, this is what it's like the Seinfeld episode where there's the misprint on the Trivial Pursuit, and it's like, who would
Oh, I'm
name
sorry.
the Moors, but it says Moops on the card, and he says, "Card says Moops."
Oh no. Oh no.
You judge that summer. It's like, well, it says this on the sheet, and I'm not hearing it, even though I know that'd be wrong if I did. But I have to make a comment, and you're gonna, For me, it was always the marimba balance this summer. It was like if they didn't hear the marimbas blaring on top of the horn line,
Right.
got called out for it. I was like, well, that's very rarely supposed to be the case. And
Right.
The P2 thing was something. I mean, when Michael asked me to be on the task force years ago, I mean,
Oh, it was your fault.
It was my fault. We got it right, I thought. I've not been a big fan, admittedly, of how things have moved. I don't think there's a right way to judge the percussion. All of them are wrong. It's like the least worst way to do it. It's like taking your drums off in WGI. There's whoever does it the best did it the least worst way, where it was unobtrusive and you kind of didn't see it. But it's just really hard to take your drums off in the indoor activity and not make it a sale at pennies kind of thing, where everything's happening. But it's weird. The percussion thing is very interesting in DCI because you're writing holistically for the big picture. Like the watermark on your glasses says effect. You're wanting to affect. But the percussionists, like on the field, they perform with their entire body. I don't think it's just the notes. It's the face. It's the tension in the neck. It's the way their shoulders look. It's how their feet move. So it's really hard to get into those little tiny crevices. It's really hard to hear that intensity upstairs. And you talked about the tick versus the build-up. I think a tick negates great compositional value these days. Anyway, the cleanest line is usually winning, not the best coordinated, most musical. Like not that they're not the one and the same, but I think it's still a little bit about the ticks, maybe a lot bit.
Yeah. Well, I think the pendulum swings, and sometimes it swung the other way, and I went, wait a minute. Here's a perfect example. I mean, the years that we won percussion in the early 2000s, so like 4 out of whatever the 5 years, a lot of what we did was the what. We may not have been the cleanest, but what we're bringing to the table was high level. And the whole thing was, it wasn't about playing it tickless. It was about playing it at a level, but you got to bring something, the environmental, the, what is it, musical, and then the physical challenge.
We're also the cleanest.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Most of them, at least.
But, like
I thought they were the cleanest.
nowadays that triad is gone. Here, I'm going to go there. I wasn't going to go there, but I love drum corps.
Get nuts. Get nuts. You got 9 minutes. Get crazy.
I'm doing it. So I love drum corps. I don't go to a lot of the caucuses or whatever, the convention anymore, because it always seemed like the directors, no matter what we did, they did their thing. And a lot of them, in my mind, either weren't educators or weren't designers or writers. And it was just like, I'm not doing this. WGI came along, I started getting involved in that and have gone to just about, well, it's been 22 years, 22, whatever you call it, Rules Congress is, right? Is that what we call it? Yeah.
Advisory board.
Yeah. So,
PAB.
yeah. And so what I love about the WGI thing, man, it's like, to me, very transparent. And I feel like as someone that is a teacher and a designer, I can go and I can contribute. I may not agree, but I can contribute, and everything's put out there. And again, it's very transparent. And it seems fair, I guess. I mean, we bitch and complain about, that visual judge, but for the most part, I go, you know what? They're getting it right, which DCI for me, they're missing some things. Like I said, that pendulum all of a sudden swung this way, and I went, where did that happen? That P2 thing I was making fun of. Like, in WGI, if those comments would have been on a tape like that, I mean, people would have lost. I mean, it would have been over, right? So what is happening here? What does DCI really need to do? Because I think there's that whole thing behind the scenes that drives me crazy. I still think it's, the marching percussion part of this is, or marching music, the whole thing with the brass, it's still the top end, right? But man, it's just like, sometimes I'm like, we have one guy, like Tom, you said it, we have one guy on the field, and we're all around this one guy. It's like, oh, Jesus, we came in 5th in percussion. One guy, depending on where he was standing, we're all like living and dying by this guy. You go to WGI and we're going, yeah, we need a visual effect guy, we need a music effect guy, we need this guy. Oh yeah, we got to have, and it's a small little arena compared to DCI. So, I mean, what are your thoughts with that? Again, drum corps I love it, but man, some of the frustration behind the scenes and the lack of transparency, I don't know, drives me.
I think Kevin Shaw's done a great job the past couple of years of kind of bringing some of that together, just with the communication on some of these rules and the reasons why and what's happening. So I feel like I understand it better than I used to. I think somewhere along the line that kind of got streamlined, and there's more information coming out that way. But I don't know. I don't think there's no easy answers with as many people involved. You mean gap between WGI and DCI is what you're saying?
Oh yeah, there's a huge gap in what that is.
The WGI, I mean, you're in a smaller venue, it's much more intimate. The drumline in WGI, the percussion are 100% always the melody. In DCI you've got many more moving parts. And it's not, I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy to adjudicate drum corps. I don't, because you're always going to be right and you're always going to be wrong, simultaneously, depending on what side of the number, technically you're on. But I don't wish it on anybody. I mean, it's got to be tough, and there's so much passion that goes into that because you've been living and breathing it for 10 months. That it can be intense, but it's hard, and it's never going to be right. It was funny, like I've gone to the Rules Congress, since 96, 97, and every year it's like pull the judges off the field, so Mike Martin goes to one a couple years ago. He calls me, he's like, dude, they're trying to pull the judges off the field. And I was like, yep, and they're going to try to do it again next year, and eventually it's probably going to happen, and it did, and we all worked around it. The visual people made sure the percussion staging was apropos to where the judge could sample, and we as percussion designers, there was some give and take. But I think it's always going to be right and wrong simultaneously. I think it's always going to be broken, because it's impossible. I mean, I think Joe Allison came out with a study that, I don't even know what it was, but out of the 100th percentile, 20% of that time you're supposed to be giving commentary was spent like running or dodging or logistics of physical motion. So there's just really not a right or a wrong way to do it.
I see what you're saying. It's like we want the recognition of all the things that would be easy to take in from like the composition, everything that you would need to be back to take in.
The
But we want this,
thoughtfulness of
we
that.
want the scrutiny of the up close detail being on the field in front of the 3 inches in front of the center line,
Yeah.
and those two things can't really happen. So
Unless there's 2 people.
Right.
From a more general standpoint, like what we have in WGI are the people that directly vote on the proposals are the designers and primary instructors of those groups, and that's not the case in DCI, and it can't be for a lot of reasons. But I wonder if when it comes to the judging and it comes to the on the field stuff, if there's each group gets one representative to vote on those things, and again, then you're having to combine captions, because I know like the visual guys from each drum corps wanted the judges off the field.
Yeah, like
And
you're
the drum guys
50-50 in your own group.
didn't really care, and so then each drum corps is then at odds about trying to make sure that they're having a united voice, and that's even within just the instructional staff. So there are a lot more moving parts, but maybe there are some opportunities to have some more direct pipelines. I feel like in DCI there's like 18 levels of committee. I went to the meeting this year and learned about these extra 10 committees that were formed and different people on each one, and it gets really confusing. And I think messages then become a little bit more diluted. And I understand your frustration there. I wonder if there's a way in certain areas of the activity if we can have more of a direct pipeline from the instruction to how things are judged.
Well, there's a ton of trust in WGI. I mean, you're allowed to talk about other groups and critique, and there's been times when the judges have we've had instructors, Andrew, I think you were one of them, that maybe Tom as well, or the judging community has come in, and we've had like a synthesis of the community and the designers, and there's just a lot of trust there, and I'm not saying there isn't in the summer acronym being DCI, but there's just so many more moving parts. It can't be easy, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so let's wrap up. There's a couple questions here. I'm going to answer this one because it's about the cadets. All of you, what's the fastest tempo you've written for? Surely cadets want this. Okay.
Won this. I think that was a misspell.
Oh.
Typo.
Okay. I think the fastest was maybe 93 when we didn't have a metronome hooked up to a Dr. Beat. It was, like this. And so some of the tempos got out of control. We were pushing probably almost 240 in the drum feature. Like the corps was marching like jump to jump to jump. And it's one of those, once the tempo goes there, it's hard to bring it back. It's a little bit easier to kind of move it forward, but we were cranking it, and we didn't have the metronome there to check it. It was kind of old style drum corps, and it kind of took off. I think if we had another day, we could have exploded. And that wasn't written like that. I think I wrote it. I think it was maybe 212, and then it just started to creep up. Some of that was how it kind of fit in the drumline's hand as we move forward. And we kind of learned from that too. The next year we kind of dialed it in, and we were a little bit better. But that's probably, I don't know. It's definitely in the 230s, man. That we were cranking, and the core was not. It wasn't like they were moving like this. They were like, I don't know for you guys. What's the fastest you for drum corps?
Like 160, 168, 169.
I wrote a chart in 2017 at 220, but we actually marched it that one. It was a John Sathis piece. It was like 110, but I wrote it 220 just so the note values were larger and it was just more pleasing to look at. You could fit all the information there. So so it was kind of cheating, but I guess.
Yeah.
Like 208, I think maybe.
Something like that.
204, yeah.
Well, we were stupid back then. We used to say, Neil and I used to say, especially with the Cavaliers. Cavaliers were like the Muhammad Ali of the activity, and the cadets, it was like Joe Frazier. So here was the wall. We would go through the wall. Cavaliers would go around the wall. Because we would do some of the hardest music at the fastest tempos with the hardest drill. Now I guess that you look back and you kind of go, yeah, but man, there were some times where you go like you're trying to clean this, and you go, you know what? We're going to have 5 ticks there. I mean, talking about ticks, 2008, the stuff that we did at the end was, and we knew it. I told the kids, I said, Jeff Prospery's on finals. He's going to get in there because he knows how to get in there, and he's going to work at it. And he did. But, you know, if you get the high cam and you watch the core do it, and you see the drum line, you go, oh, it's a 10. But I'm sitting up there going, yeah, I know that's going to be one. Oh, there's one. Because, I mean, we were running, and the step size was like, you know, I mean, I'm 6'4". It was past what I could possibly do when I was 21, you know. But, you know, I think going back to like the visual versus the balance of what you do musically, it was one of those. We all said, you know what? This is a visual effect, and we're going to have to suck it up.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of
For
thing.
sure.
So, all right. How about one more here? Last one here. We'll wrap it up. What was the most shocking, amazing thing you heard on a drum tape? Anyone?
Like in a bad or a good way?
I don't know. That's all it has. It's like, what was the most shocking thing that you heard?
Wow. It's an interesting question.
I mean, I think for me, it was probably, you know, like last year's tape with Jeff was pretty off the charts. You know, he was kind of, you know, he saw us a bunch, and he's like, that's not it, and it was like, okay, that was it, kind of thing. The other one for me was like 1987 when we got a perfect score, perfect 30 actually. When you listen to all 3 of the tapes, you kind of knew it before it happened, I guess. So you're listening to the tapes, and it's just like, shit, this is going to happen. Because we had scored perfect 10s a couple shows before the finals. And so Hannum and I talked to the group, and Hannum's like, this could happen. And so we're listening to the tape, and it was like, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. So you know, at the end, you listen to all the tapes, and you go, we would have been shocked if it wasn't a perfect score, I guess. You know, listening to the tapes because of how they just were buying everything. Now, you know, I think we were probably the cleanest. Okay, it was an era where, you know, we were so different than the Blue Devils or whoever, you know, Vanguard. It was such a percussion ensemble, full ensemble kind of moment, and I think in that, like, you know, we didn't play anything you guys played. I mean, the Blue Devils were like, you know, playing the rock star stuff. We were just kind of fitting into the ensemble, you know. But we did it, and we maxed out 3 feet. So
I was still playing saxophone in '87, so don't loop me in with any of that amazingness.
I remember not being able to understand how the Cadets won drums when I was like in '87. I was 13. It was like, because I was a Blue Devil fan at that time, you know. And I was like, they played all the notes, and then I, you know, obviously you step back from it years later and understand. But
that's how you made Snare Line in '94. Remember that?
That's right.
I said,
I can't
change your mind. All of a sudden, I like the Blue Devils. I'm like,
no, Tom,
well, you better like us. You're not going to make the Snare Line.
I tell you, it was 1989. It was at Mechanicsburg High School, watching you guys rehearse. That was like, all right, that's it. That was what I'm going to do. That's what I do. So, it's awesome.
I've heard some questionable vocals on some judges' tapes before that I didn't know were in the show, and then addressed the following day.
Yep.
How about when the judge picked up? Was it Helen Christensen? I've heard that tape. Like, here's your drum.
Oh, 2014. I was there for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your son was as well, right?
I remember some Charlie Poole tapes from when I was marching that were like colorful, like exuberant and energetic. It's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you heard the Charlie Poole tapes, and you're like, shit, we're gonna max out drums. We're in third.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a 20.6. Yeah, we're in third. Yeah, for sure.
All right, gentlemen. Well, it's about, let's say, 10:07. Do we have anything else we want to kind of say tonight before we go to bed?
honored to be with you all, you guys. This has been a lot of fun, and you're all guys I look up to, and I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I've done these because I like doing it. And I think I mean, this is going to be archived, and I'm hoping people can come back and listen to this, and, kids maybe 10, 15 years from now, and, they want to listen to what went on in this time. So it's kind of a history thing for me. And then the other part is, I love listening to what goes on in the arrangers or drum corps, drum guys, keyboard guys' heads. Like why was that so cool? Like, like having Eric Johnson on a couple weeks ago was cool. And then with Neil there, and we're talking about that. And that's the first time we were able to talk about what all that was. And so I think that's cool. I find that fascinating. That as a kid watching drum corps and the sticks coming down the same and all sounding the same, I was like, that's cool. That's what I want to do. Like you said, 89, right? And you kind of go, that's what I want to do. And now to be able to, at 57, come back at it and talk about what goes through your mind. And, like with Andrew being able to do all three of these things, I mean, it's like, that's incredible, So when I look at your groups doing what you do, it's like I have a little bit more information now, and I'm going to steal a little bit more now than I have before. So you'll see a little Mike McIntosh lick in there. Might not be what he would write, but kind of what he would write.
I'm gonna fanboy here for a second. I'll start with Andrew. Like, I watched him grow up, literally. Like, I remember Tim telling me that's Mr. Fairbanks' son. He's doing a good job. And I remember the stuff you wrote. You wrote a trombone feature for Centerville, like your first year. You wrote the music, and I was like, wow, that's just amazing. And just watching what you've done it's inspiring, for sure. I mean, Mr. Aungst, obviously, 84 Cadets, first drum corps I saw live in my life. I just happened to get in the car. They pulled up in my driveway and like, are you coming or not to the show? And I was like, Nashville, Tennessee. I was like, okay, I'll go. What is this? And I saw 84 Cadets doing a clinic, and I was like, what is this? There's something here. And then I watched you walk up to your warm-up in 93, all bedazzled and looking dapper at finals, and I was like, that's who I want to be. I want to be that guy. He's rolling in.
I still look pretty good, right?
You still look good.
Yeah, right, thanks.
And then, I went, and I'm a big proponent of, like, don't, if you want your own gig, go get your own gig. You never want to do anything. When I left to go to Bluecoats, Dennis Delucia pulled me aside and said he really respected that decision because he's been on the other end of things that have gone south when, people have gotten funky and stuff. But Tom and Tom knew what he was doing, Tom Rarick.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing. And we just did what we thought was right. And to this day, I'm still trying to recapture that magic, whatever that was, of those 06, 07, 08 lines. And obviously there was a sense of continuum with Tom's, expertise. But, just to come together with him and, obviously tons of respect there. And just to be, I'm just a guy with anxiety that puts his socks on like everybody else who is, really lucky and, worked really hard sometimes. And I feel very, very honored that, everybody on this call is still trying to make a difference.
Yep.
That's important to me, especially in these crazy times, these incredible times, unique times we're living in. So,
definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you to our listeners and viewers tonight. Just reminders, the next 2 Thursdays coming up, Percussion Thursdays, 8:00 p.m. Hopefully you'll join us. Got some great people to talk about drum corps. And our percussion virtual camp that the cadets are putting on June 22nd through the 26th. All ages, all levels, instructors, directors. Go to cadets.org. and register. I'd love to see a lot of people there. So, and if you guys want to come, I don't know, we'll see. Got some good exercises. So,
what's that pay?
What does it pay? No, you have to pay us.
I'll pay you.
All right. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Enjoy it. Have a good night. We'll see everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Be
You
safe,
guys, thanks.
Take care.